All right, so I'm not going to talk my mask on. Is that cool? All right, sweet. I'm just saying, so you guys have to see. All right, so remind me, how much time do we totally have?
So we have an hour and a half, sir, but we can go less. Lieutenant Colonel Kramer here is the brainchild. He's our chief pilot, brainchild behind the PD program. Your classmates together at the academy, fakes together. C5s, of course, now following back here. When him and I sat down, I took him in, we just kind of thought out how we want to change PD. And the Double Deuce and Cosmo just took that commander's intent and ran with it. So he's got a 2-minute pitch, sir, for you before you start. That's okay.
I'm now ready. Go. Are those people online?
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, if I like that or not. All right, go ahead.
Colonel Simmons, welcome to the Double Deuce. Lieutenant Colonel Kramer, I have the distinct pleasure of serving as the chief pilot here, and along with the chief flight engineer and chief loadmaster, we run the PD program for this part. We also wanted to smell like pilot training because we got a lot of T1 face in the house. So back in March, April, we started putting the infrastructure together to really get at PD and enrich our people. And then COVID hit. So this did two things for us. It gave us a very captive audience who couldn't go anywhere. And it also forced us to leverage technology. So what we did, we started putting lesson plans, videos together, 10, 15-minute videos every single Wednesday for 2 months. And then on Thursday, we would have a discussion like this, which was also recorded. We talked things out, take about an hour, and then we loaded them all onto the Double Deuce Cloud, which currently has about 62 videos and 7 different playlists. After a couple months with the officers, we wanted to share the love and get with our enlisted, so we had 2 months of JPDs, covering a bunch of topics. And that was so successful, we decided the EPD would stand up, the OPD would stand up with some of our young officers, CGOs running the program, and JPDs would happen when we had a chance like this. We also realized we had a blind spot with our FGOs, flight commanders, senior NCOs, so we created an SPD series, which really gets more at executive leadership. In all of our videos, we have guest speakers come in and talk. Some of them now we're starting to reach outside of the unit and spread our tentacles out there. What's really cool about this, we are able to archive our lessons. How many great CTs have you been to? You took some notes, but then it's gone. Now we have them forever, which is great for people to build on over time. The other cool thing, I remember our second week of PD, I was in Georgia on a mission. I uploaded our Wednesday video, and then a day later, I was in crew rest in my building room in Ramstein watching the live chat take place. So it's given us a lot of flexibility and a lot of reach for our crews around the world. The future of the program is kind of what you're kicking off today, reaching out to senior leaders and giving them an opportunity to speak to a bigger forum out there. And future plans are to reach outside of Travis and gain more experience and spread it on to other units in the OG, in the wing, because the Double Deuce wants to be a part of the tide that raises all ships. So that's my quick pitch.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. That's a pretty good pitch. All right, so all right, so you can, so Brandon Sappho, I see you online. Yeah. Right. Just give me a wave that you can hear me. All right, cool. And now you go back to sleep. So we can take this a lot of different ways, right? And so the request was for me to kind of talk through the crisis action decision-making stuff that was happening on the night of the fires, right? And so that's what I asked the CAG to help me try to recreate, right? From, first phone call, who I talked to, and I'll kind of build it from there, right? That won't take nearly as long as you think, right? And we can dovetail any of these places. If you have a burning question as I'm going through this, like why the hell did you do that? Please let's do this that way as opposed to me just vomiting for a little bit and then asking questions at the end. You gave me a preamble of some of the questions you may want to get after. We can talk about any of that. The beauty of getting to be a wing commander twice is that I've got to do a lot of public speaking. And my last base being a pilot train grad, I had a brand new captive audience every 3 weeks, right? And so my jokes were always funny, right? My stories were always compelling, right? And so, but to be fair, I haven't got to get any of those stories here, right? You'd be surprised. I don't have a lot of opportunities as the wing commander in a small group or a large group to really talk through professional development, decision-making. I get to do it a lot with the squadron commanders, right? But I don't really get to get any other touch points, right? So this is actually a treat for me. If you get anything out of this today, it's that at some point, some normal person is sitting in a very important chair making some decision, right? I'm not any smarter than any of you. I'm not the God's gift of decision making, right? I was scared shitless in places that this was happening. I just happened to be Corey and I happened to be the wing commander, Travis, right? And so, been really lucky over 22 years to get a lot of different weird experiences that some folks haven't got to get. And in that one scenario, I kind of got the pull from all of them on the same day, and made a gut call, and it worked out, right? Nobody was hurt, everybody got away, and we looked like heroes. I mean, at the end of the day, we looked like heroes. And so, but it was ugly and dirty and not perfect, right? And so that's what I'll try to do here. So who's slide flicker? That had to go. All right, so I don't think there's any builds, which is good, right? Which is cool. And so this is what really happened. So it was Wednesday into Thursday, right? Wednesday morning. All right, so Tuesday night late, I had 3 cocktails with the OG and went to bed feeling pretty good about myself, right? About 10:30, went to sleep. The next morning was a normal day. We had kind of gotten a little bit of action about potential wildfires, all that stuff. And to be fair, I was like, what are you talking about? Right? I've never been stationed in Northern California, have no concept of what a wildfire is. Just like, all right, sounds cool, whatever, right? And then I got the first phone call, as you see, at 150 local. And so that's the command post calling, saying that, and they gave me a bunch of roads that I've never heard of in my life. The command post controller's a 2-striper on the line. I'm like, so where are they at? He doesn't know. And so you can imagine that kind of back and forth. And I said, well, how many people does it affect? He said, I don't know. I'm like, all right, well, cool. So how about we re-rally? You kind of ask a few more questions and call me back, right? And so first phone call was at 150. Sorry, 105. You can transcribe there. So 105. They called me back at about 140 and said, hey, we think it's about 10 families, right? And it was a WAG based on a few other folks that had called in and all this kind of stuff. It's about 10 families. I'm like, all right, cool, bring them to the base, no big deal. Right? And if you remember, we had 250 people in ROM doing all that kind of stuff, right? So now are we going to cross multiply and how important? And at this point, nobody cares, right? Nobody cares other than a few families that had to be evacuated, right? Transposes into 338, another phone call, and you can kind of see how this thing is going to get further south. I get another wakes me, so I go back to sleep, right? 3:30, it wakes me back up again, and I never go back to bed. Okay, so 3:38, and then there's a whole bunch of phone calls that happened between 3:38 and when I said I wanted to have a CAP meeting at 9, right? Because what you don't know is that I had a 4-star DTC with Gerald Miller because it was her last day. That was her last day as the AMC commander. Gerald Van always takes command the next morning, right? And so I'm on a BTC with all the other wing commanders in my skivvies, in my office at the house, while all this fire stuff is starting to kind of brew, right? And so we get to that point, and we have a 9 o'clock huddle / CAT, which none of your bosses are on, not unless they magically log on that day. They're not required to be there. It's essentially 06 level, command post, all those folks, and we kind of battle staff, hey, what do we know? And at 9 o'clock, it was, hey boss, all this shit's gonna be north of 80. We've had these fires before. We had one 2 years ago. We got all the way to the back gate, and it was no big deal. I need you to just go about your business, right? And I had the text message that I sent to the MSG, and I said, hey man, I've never done this before. So somebody's gonna have to help me get my blood pressure to rise, right? Because I don't know where that is. And so the running joke was, when it crosses 80, you're gonna go from 0 to a billion, right? And so how far are we from 80? About 3.5 miles north, and everything looks pretty good, right? And in that time frame, it kind of started up here, and then by the time we get to mid-afternoon, it's all the way down here, and we've evacuated, at least from a Travis standpoint, about 150 families, right? Now, when you put that in perspective, there's 9,000 families, okay? So you do math. Are you concerned yet? I still wasn't. I still didn't know that I needed to be, right? And then we had the 2 o'clock call, which I think most of the squad commanders were listening to, right? And we kind of went through this back staff thing again, and everybody's doing their thing. And FSS says, hey, we've now exhausted all rooms on base. Whatever we're going to have to do is going to have to be off campus, right? We had already gone to the finance folks, and I'm like, all right, so what's my legal authority to fund stuff? Right? Well, you'll be surprised. It's not clean, right? When I evacuated the base, it's pretty simple, right? I ordered everybody off the base. Alex, I don't know where you live, but if you live off base, did I ask you to live there?
No, sir.
No, right? So when you evacuated, do I have a legal requirement to fund anything that you have to do because your house is burning down? Do I have a legal obligation?
No, sir.
No, right? But I feel like I've got a moral obligation as trying to take care of airmen, right? But legal and moral don't always match.
Yes, sir.
Right? They don't always match. And so as these numbers get higher and higher, I'm going to have to go back to somebody and be like, all right, where's the line? Right? Is it because you were ordered to evac from a competent federal/state deal, or did you get scared? Right? Because those are two very different things, right? And that's kind of where the line ended up being, right? If you got scared and moved, I really couldn't fund it, right? I really could not write a check to be able to do that, right? But if the state of Swan County or the city said, hey man, you're out of here, I could get there, right? And there'll be multiple lawyers who said I shouldn't have done that either, right? And so this is what it is, right? And so it was the end of the fiscal year. I asked the comptroller, how much money do I have in the kitty? It was more than I thought I needed, and I said, go, right? And so that was the money decision as far as who we were going to fund and not fund. So we made that call about 2 o'clock, right? So during that 2 o'clock call, hey, how are we going to do this? And we still thought we were only going to do 150 families, right? That's kind of where we're at. And we went around the room, and this was not a high point for me, right? And so most everybody was still pretty calm, right? And the back of my hair was starting to stand up, right? Mainly because I just had no experience in this. And we didn't have one crew and crew rest. We weren't even thinking about airplanes. Not one crew and crew rest. When we woke up that morning, there was 35 jets on the ramp. 16 of them were mission capable. In various versions of PMC and FMC and all that kind of stuff, right? So if you just do some math, there's a lot of that going on. And I was kind of a prick. I said, all right, I'm going to be the asshole in the room. What are we going to do when this thing crosses 80? Or where is the trigger point for me as a wing commander to do something different than we're doing right now? And it was crickets, right? And so, not a high point for me because I pretty much put the entire staff on notice that I was not happy, right? That turned into two C5 crews and crew rest. Go find them. Go put them in crew rest. Go find me 2 C17 dudes. Go find me 2 KC10 crews. Mainly because I didn't know if we were going to be asked to do something tonight, tomorrow, whatever, that was a real world mission. It had nothing to do with evacuating airplanes, right? I wasn't there yet. Right? It was about, am I going to need to do something later that I'm not going to be prepared for, right? And same thing with CE. All right, so when is your decision point to call me back? How are we going to do this? And we kind of left there, we're fine. Okay. And then as you can kind of filter this thing through, it's 1630, it crossed 80. It's all over the news. Right, it's all over the news. Who was here for the Nelson fires in 2018? Right, so to be fair, the Nelson fires, so again, here's things that should matter. I have no clue where Peabody Road is. No clue. If Austin crosses Peabody, we're in deep shit. Okay, cool. Can somebody show me where that is on a map? Right? Or when it crosses this place, this is what we're going to do. So
If you actually Google Travis Air Force Base right now, you can actually see where the fire is burnt from that brown spot that comes all the way across Peabody on Google Maps right now. That's the old fire, right? And so that fire got between Peabody and Meridian Road, right? And so when that happened in 2018, there were 53 fire trucks pointed at it, right? Because that fire was very concentrated over Seaman Hill, right? Came across Seaman Hill, kind of about Paradise Valley, right? Come across the hill, and there was, again, 53 fire trucks. So all of Solano County fire, all of Vacaville fire, all of Fairfield fire, all of Travis Air Force Base fire, and 32 trucks from Cal Fire, all pointed at that thing as it came across the hill, and we didn't evacuate, right? Makes sense, right? So 1630, this happens. I know that it was 1722 when I was summoned to the CAT because I had just finished a meeting with Leslie Lederhouse, the protocol officer, because guess who's coming in the next week? Cheryl freaking Van Ovos, right? I'm going through a 4-star visit, which in about 15 minutes I could get 3 shits there, right? And so we get to that point, and I get the call from the CAT, and it's from Glenn Cameron, the C commander, and the fire chief, right? And our fire chief has been through some stuff. He's an old Cal fire chief. He was a Vacaville fire chief. He's been our fire chief for a decade, right? And if you don't know, our firefighters fight real fire every day, right? They get called on real calls outside our wire every single day, right? So they know what bad is opposed to good. And he said, sir, I need you to come to CAT. And so we do, we go to the CAT. And so I finally get to the CAT. So this decision was made at 1814. I get to CAT at 1755. All right, so 19 minutes later, I'm gonna make a decision to evacuate, okay? And this conversation goes like this: boss, we're gonna ask you to make a decision with not the best information, with limited way to confirm, but this is what we know, and this is where we're at. And so they tell me the story of the Nelson Fire, which is the first time I've ever heard that story. Right? I don't know the story then. And he said, sir, I have 7 fire trucks. It took 53 to stop it last time. I have 7. Right, so I'll slow it down, but if it comes across Peabody into the Grassoline area that is between Peabody and our north gate, it's getting in housing. And after that, we don't know. Right? After that, we don't know. And I go, okay, so how much time do I have? It's as well as you use the Nelson Fire as an example. If it crests the hill at Cement Hill, which at the time it was about a quarter mile away from that near Paradise Valley, right? If you go to Paradise Valley, you can see where all that burnt to nothing. If it uses that same, you've got about 2 hours and 45 minutes before you don't have any more decision space. Okay. All right, so how long will you think it'll take to be able to evacuate housing? We have no idea. How long do you think it'll take for us to be able to tell them to evacuate housing? Well, pretty fast. Okay. All right. So the decision to evacuate housing was easy. Right. It actually wasn't that hard. We had clear roads going out the north gate. You weave around, kind of get towards Sacramento. Out the south gate, you could kind of go down and weave around past to get down toward Walnut Creek and those areas. We didn't really think through trying to go west or east on the Southern Road. We should have thought through that. We really didn't. So even your family members who tried to go west, they sat in a parking lot for a really, really long time, right? We didn't think through that. But I made the call at 1814 to evacuate base housing. And then I sat down and I go, all right, so now what? We're going to evacuate base housing. What does that mean for the rest of the Air Force Base? All right, well, what you don't know, that's really only about 15% of the people who work here, right? 85% of you live off installation and make your way back to work every day. And so to me, there was a little bit of apprehension about if the fire got in base housing, very limited a way to fight it because all of our other firefighters are fighting things at Vacaville and Fairfield and all those other places, right? So we're not going to get any help. So you could deduce pretty quickly that it was going to get into main base. How far, I don't know. No one really believed that we were going to get to the ramp and get our airplanes and have them go up the planes. There's a shit ton of concrete
right? But what we did believe is that if we got a base housing, the optic of us trying to operate combat air mobility while people are losing their homes or having limited access to the base because it had gone across Air Base Parkway, or gone across North Bay Road, getting you physically on the installation to be able to execute combat air mobility. I didn't know when that was going to happen again. The time of day matters, right? It was at the end of the duty day. We literally thought through, there's less people probably drunk yet that have been drinking yet, right? If this is 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night, different story, right? I knew that we had fresh maintainers coming on main shift at, they reported at 6, right? So I knew I had at least a shift of solid maintainers to be able to start doing their thing. And then I just believed. At the end of the day, I just believed because I called Jay Watt. He's the one who answered the phone, the OG. And I was like, who's the waiver authority for crew rest? I didn't know who it was. I didn't know if it was me. I didn't know if it was Greg. In case you're wondering, it's the half A3. Is the waiver for crew rest like this. It's delegated down to the AMC A3, but the actual waiver authority is the half A3. I called General Bibb and I said, sir, in 10 minutes, I'm going to ask you for a waiver that you're not tracking. I'm going to ask you for a crew rest waiver for everybody, an MEL waiver for everything, and allow our squadron commanders and superintendents to make real-time CRM calls. And when it gets stupid, they'll tell me. That was the waiver I asked for. I didn't say it was the right one. I said it's the one I asked for. And so, what's the next chart say? Because I don't really know. Okay, we'll go back to that. And so we made the call. 1830-ish is when I actually said launch the fleet, right? And Jay Watt said, what? I said launch the fleet. All of them? Yep. What's victory? I have no idea. Right? I didn't know. Right? I figured that there was 16 tails that were good. I hoped we'd get those. I figured maintenance would do their thing and get a few more. But I didn't know. And I said, whatever's left over in the middle of the ramp, we'll write it out. Right? That was our way to go. And you guys know the rest of the story. Right? We had one unfortunate incident of folks trying to go too fast in the C-17 side, where some maintainers and pilots didn't do a great job of communicating. We ended up having a relatively significant oblique fire that turned into a Class A mishap. Right? And many of you in this room would think that I got in trouble for that. Nope. Nobody even questioned this. Right? Good airmen do the right thing for the right reasons. There's nobody in their right mind that would have believed that nothing bad was going to happen. Right? I didn't believe that. What if I told you that was our first launch? Would have been really easy to just pack it in. Right? To be fair, the information that was given to me about that fire was basically, it's fine. APU fire, which is not what it was, right? It's not what it was, but that's not what got to me, right? And so 7 hours and 46 minutes later, the ramp was as empty as it was going to get. 3 hours and 15 minutes after 10:30, the base is basically empty. Cops banging on doors and things. And so if you want something funny, I had gone to my house at 10:10 to go pack my own bag because I hadn't yet. And I am literally using the restroom in my house, and the cops are banging on my door because my car is in the driveway, and they think I'm dead. It's pretty funny in retrospect. It wasn't funny at the time. Funny now. I don't know if you have spouses, but communicating with spouses in this was a challenge because our spouses are spouses of the 21st century. They want to know what is going on, right? And that information was hard to get, right? How close is the fire? Well, in which direction? It was hard. And, I really just kind of counted on folks like Trumbull and all the other squadron commanders and superintendents to be able to get out the best information they could, keep their folks safe. And I didn't really ask any questions, right? So, and I'll talk about why we lived to do it when we did later. So that's the so what, right? Does it jive with what you thought might have happened? Is it different? About what you thought? Yeah, kind of much that, well, if it's about what you thought, then our comp plan wasn't awful. Right? But I had this vision of their DO going, hey Alex, how many beers you had? More than 2? Come on in, you go last. Right? Right? I mean, that's what I was trusting you guys to do, right? Is to go figure it out, right? So, next chart. All right, so these are some of the issues. Yeah, none of our information was perfect. If you thought I had some great satellite imagery of the fires, I had none of that. I was using CNN and the Weather Channel and all the things that everybody else is using. CAL FIRE are not helpful in that you find out later that when they say 0% contained, that number is directly tied to how many resources they're given. So what is their motivation to ever change that number? Until they know shit have it under control, right? So you never got to see progress. What saved us was the wind, in case you're wondering, right? The wind shifted about 30 degrees and died down. And so essentially as it crested up the hill of Cement Hill, it essentially folded on top of itself. We didn't really do anything. That wasn't a water thing or anything like that. We got lucky. Our CE folks went out with big backhoes and bulldozers and pissed off every environmental dude that's associated with California and scraped the berry shrimp of whatever that's only here, and and they did all that, right? To be able to give us some fire breaks. I was actually surprised on how well we were able to keep accountability of our folks. That was actually a surprise. I didn't think we'd be as good at that as we were, but we generally knew where folks were, and I know your Mattermost was helpful in this case. And every squadron did it a little bit differently. Obviously, you had folks who evacuated to Travis only to evacuate again. I had folks like maybe your squadron commander that was moving into his house when this happened. The PA lieutenant that showed up as her first day at work. She shows up at 16:14, right? And she's in the car going somewhere else. It was really hard. And then of course we talked about everybody. Next chart. And this stuff I've more or less talked through already, but you can kind of see it was real. And so this was the picture the next morning, right? And so this was the decision that allowed me to be able to bring folks home, right? I wanted a safe corridor for folks to be able to come down I-80. I purposely waited until 10 o'clock the next day because it was really close to checkout time, so that folks that they couldn't get checked out, I could pay them another day, right? So I had this picture at 6 a.m. I purposely waited until 10 so that folks had more flexibility. I will tell you that many of your spouses and the spouses on our base were like in a tanker holding pattern outside of our base waiting for it to open. It's like people were like at 10:01, it was a flood of folks getting back on the base. It was actually kind of funny. Our cops were amazing. There was a 19-year-old cop standing at the north gate saying, I'm not leaving my post until the last car's gone. He'd been working for 17 hours. He said, I'm not leaving. You can't make me leave. You had the maintainers that had worked their 8-hour shift that stayed until 2 o'clock in the morning, right? And those weren't your seniors and your masters. Those were your 2 stripers and 3 stripers who saw it in our eyes that this was real and kind of got after it. It was really kind of amazing to watch. At 2:30, I sent the last airplane had done its thing. I sent the email to the boss that says they're all airborne. A note when they all land. I went to bed and got to bed at 3:30, and I took a 5 o'clock phone call because, of course, it's 7 o'clock at Scott, and they want to know what's going on when they got out of bed, right? And so got about an hour and a half sleep, and then the next day was no one here and evacuated, but I felt like we talked to everybody. Why did you do that? Are you sure? How much money did you spend? Did anybody get hurt? All the things that I ask you when shit goes wrong, right? That stuff goes uphill too. I was really surprised at how few critical questions we had, right? There was a lot of pushing the I believe button, which I think is important. Next chart. And then you can kind of see from here, this is all the stuff that we did. So there was about 3,600 folks evacuated. For the evacuation for us lasted 2.5 days. For FM, it hasn't stopped yet because they're processing all 1,700 of your vouchers that they weren't counting on doing the day before. We talked about the airplanes. What if I told you that we evacuated the entire hospital? Right, so there was 42 patients in med surge in various stages. A lady gave birth at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and now we got to move her child. There were 6 critical care patients in the ICU that we moved. There was a dozen health patients, which are really hard to move because the resources in other hospitals aren't very good. And oh, by the way, there's a bunch of fire between us and them. And so our aircraft evac is the one we like to beat our chest about, but I'm telling you that hospital was probably more Herculean than that. Because you want to talk about being a Monday morning quarterback, how many people have had to die? One. Just one. Or one getting to a more critical state. Right? And all of this was happening while we're dealing with COVID. How many COVID cases do you think came as a result of this? Not one. Right? So either generally we've kept our protocols, right? That we've been doing what we've been doing, but we cannot tie any additional active duty COVID cases to this guy. Okay, so it's pretty cool. Next chart. And then this was the rest of the timeline. So Thursday we kind of took a breath. Could have brought folks back a little sooner, decided totally not to. Specifically the air crew, because I had you in the middle of the night, and you guys specifically. I wanted to send you guys somewhere closer, right? That really wasn't a good option. Right? There really wasn't. We could have sent you to Edwards, but if you remember, they were dealing with fires in Southern California too, so that didn't seem very smart. And I expected all of you to break, so I wanted you to break with other stuff. Right, and so there was some reasoning behind that. Friday, we brought the families back and started thinking through our return plan. Your officer commander wanted to bring all 31 airplanes back the same day. I stopped that because I wasn't necessarily fully comfortable with where the fire was or where it could go. And I'm like, I got it. We all want to get home, but let's slow a roll. And so it was, it started with 10, 10, and 10, or 10, 10, and 9, and it ended up being, we brought 10 back on Saturday, and we ended up bringing everybody else back on Sunday based on the information that we had. Did not count on everybody having to shoot a Cat 1 ILS to minimums on the way home because of smoke. That wasn't part of my cross-check, right? Saturday looked like a Tuesday. It was awesome. And Sunday, I was like, "Jeez, can you make this any harder?" Right? But everybody got in, right, with minimal drama. And then Monday, short of flying locals, it looked like any other Monday at travel. That was probably my proudest moment, right? Is that for the rest of the Air Force, no big deal, just another Monday. So I think that's the last chart. So that's the so what. That's how we got here, right? And so I'll say what I said before. I'm not any smarter than anybody else. I have been through some really shitty things though. I've been the wing commander of a Class A mishap where 2 people died in theater, right? I've been the wing commander for 3 suicides. I've been the squadron commander for 2 suicides and a Class A mishap. I have been the investigating officer for Shell 77, which was the KC-135 that fell out of the sky. I've been the guy that has knocked on the door 4 times for family members that have died or severely injured when you're knocking on the door in your service dress. That's what I built on, right? It's life experiences that will gauge what gets your blood pressure up and doesn't get your blood pressure up. I surrounded myself with really, really smart people. The beauty of this is that actually, that was day 31 of my command. Okay, how many people did I know in that room?
No one, right? I don't have a previous relationship with Zach Tremont, the vice. I've known my chief for a month, short of a telephone dating interview, right? The fire chief, it's the first time I'd ever seen him. The CE commander, I had gone through the immersion 2 days before. I had had beers with all the squadron commanders already because they had reached out my house, right? But I've been trying to sell this trust word since we've been here, right? There's no better example of that than that, right? It looked at Harris, Air Force, Master Sergeant, I don't have to know anything else, right? And that's kind of how it went, right? So did we get lucky? Yeah. But there's a book, John Wooden, man, what happens when preparation and opportunity collide. That's what you call luck, right? So we were ready, we executed. So now ask me if I have to have another large formation exercise anytime soon. Not interested. But ask me if we get credit for what we did. No. Because we're gonna have a UEI in January and some new clocks on it. So, all right, so questions about the fire? Yes, sir, please.
Yes, sir. My son Harris, from the CST shop over here in the comm squadron for base comm. My question to you is, did you see a difference between operations and support during this crisis?
No, well, here's what I could say was similar. You guys see, please. The sense of urgency was real, right? Like I didn't get to talk to anybody that blew off what we were doing, right? And that's really, I don't know what that is necessarily a testament to, but you know, when my wife said last night, sorry, it was actually Greg Johnson's wife, said, when I heard the airplanes were leaving, I'd get the hell out. Right? So I actually do believe that when we actually said that the airplanes were leaving, everybody's blood pressure went up and decided that it was real. I can tell you from the Women of Travis Facebook page, I was not popular, right? For folks that had to evacuate out of their houses. But that's okay, right? I'll take that hit. But from our LRS supply guys, right? We didn't have to wait on gas the whole time, right? Our comm stayed up in your world the entire time. FSS was prepared for food for folks who had to stay and do stuff throughout the night. Everybody kind of had their role, knew what it was, skinny down their shops as far as they possibly could, had exactly what they needed and moved out. And so the question that I had to fight myself, I had to fight this, was asking Trump, did he have everything he needed? Right? I wanted to ask him that so bad, or ask you, do you have everything you need? Or because that would be me trying to control it, right? I just believe that if you needed it bad enough, you come up on voice, right? And we actually did at the end of the day. We actually, was 2 airplanes that could have took off, and between maintenance and the air crew, they called knock it off, and I didn't even question. We could have got 33 or 25, but we only got 31. Damn. Right. So I was actually really happy. Can I answer your question?
Yes, okay, thank you.
Who else? Anybody else about fire service?
Yes, sir. Staff Sergeant Corey Robertson, flight engineer, and I work in the training flight. My question to you is, what kind of leadership traits or resources did you lean on to make these decisions?
I have to. Oh, that's not a loaded question. All right, so leadership traits. So this is the one I wrote down. So you guys got an article. Did y'all read the article on Ned Stark? The Ned Stark article just a few days ago. I don't want to say you stole that shit from me, but I have some similar, right? So it's really easy to lead by authority. That's not hard, right? And it starts with how you introduce yourself. Like I purposely say my name is Corey Simmons. I don't say it's Colonel Simmons. I don't say I'm the wing commander. My name is Corey Simmons, right? Because that just exudes authority. I want influence. I don't want authority, right? I want to be able to have a relationship with the folks who are working for me, around me, and through me, that they can have a real conversation. We can have real dissent. And at the end of the day, we're either going to move out
or we're gonna do something different, right? And so my leadership trait, I like to think of myself as a coach as opposed to a leader, right? It's trying to get a disparate bunch of folks who look a lot different than each other, but all generally believe the same thing, which is that we're the greatest Air Force in the world, and the greatest country in the world. And how do I get all of us with that in our back of our heads to be able to move the ball in one general direction? And so the guys who yell and scream, they last for a very finite period of time, right? You can lead through fear, you'll get, and you can be successful, right? I can show you general officers that have led that way, and the system would say that they're successful. Success for me, to be honest with you, brother, is a card that I get 2 years from now. That Harris sends me a card 2 years from now and says, hey boss, do you remember when we did this? And you listened to me? Never forgot it. Those are my, whether I get to be a general officer or none of that shit matters, right? It's those little notes, right? Of that you stopped, you listened. We didn't necessarily agree, but I understood what your why was, and we kind of went go. So the leadership traits that I'm really looking for is people who can actually talk, not talk at, converse with, right? That's what I'm really looking for. We know the hierarchy of the Air Force. We're not stupid. We know that because the colonel says something, we're supposed to do it. But if I can give you the why, it's really funny. You don't need me anymore, right? And that's really what I found in this scenario, is that once we made a call, you didn't need me anymore. You only needed me if something went wrong, right? And you had to believe that if something went wrong, that I'd be the one that took the bullet. If you didn't believe that, you wouldn't have done it. And there's a lot of folks between me and some of you, right? So you had to believe that Trump would have backed you. You had to believe that your chief would have backed you. You had your flight command all the way to the aircraft command, right? You had to believe that, right? Because the organization that sucks, brother, is that when something goes wrong, it goes just like this, right? Not my job, not my fault, right? I want to be in the organization where someone like Chris Fernandez doesn't let me get to you. If you're the one that made a mistake, I never get to see you, right? Because somebody else has owned it long before that moment. How'd I do?
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. All right, what else you got? And now we can go off topic, right? So it doesn't have to be about this. I saw some of your, the one I'm not prepared for, I'm certain it's your question about how do we brand Spark in the future, so I'm gonna have to hold that.
That was not mine.
I'm gonna have to hold that one for later.
That was not mine.
Go ahead.
Sir, Cole Reinbold, superintendent here. What was your interaction with like TACC and trying to generate the missions at Kelly or at other places whenever we had dispersed?
Yeah, you're gonna love this answer. Zero. I never talked to him. Now, do I believe that Greg Johnson and Jay Watt and all those guys talk to him? All the time. I never got in those weeds. Never really cared. For me, it was about safety and health and welfare of the installation. And then I breathed a little sigh of relief when everybody landed code 1, which, by the way, all 8 of you landed code 1 and landed Blackville was not supposed to happen. But that's why I declared victory, right? And so at that point, it's right back where it needs to be. Right back into the squadron commanders and the GOs and the superintendents and all at that level. From a warfighter standpoint, we asked them, what do you need us to do from a warfighter standpoint, originating from those locations, right? Because there was 4 missions that were supposed to take off on Thursday, another 2 on Friday, right? And so it's like, all right, so what have you already dispersed off to McGuire and Dover, or what do we need to be prepared to do? We end up launching 2 coordinates out of Fairchild. I think you get the reserve pick up a mission out of Kelly, if I recall, right? 2 missions right out of Kelly. And so honestly, you just let the machine do what the machine does. It became a mini TDD cell in Kuwait, just like we do in theater, right? And so that's the beauty of the AFC. They can kind of see everything. I didn't take a call from a user. I didn't take a call from anybody saying, hey, I didn't get what I needed because of this, right? But I didn't do anything, which is awesome. I am the best at doing that. Okay.
Kevin Will, training flight commander in the Double Deuce. With General Brown's accelerate, change, or lose, looking back now, what would you change? Where's Travis headed in that direction?
This is the part about being the wing commander. Travis is very, very intimidating. Because you, whether via the Spark Cell or previous leadership communities, the reputation of this place is as a pathfinder, right? Some of that's warranted, some of it's not, to be fair, right? Because an idea is only as good as the execution you put behind it, right? But I am not fearful at all about Travis lagging behind ever. Between the Spark Cell, which is kind of the focal point, but it's a figurehead, right? It is just a piece of this, right? The innovation that's happening in the Double Deuce, that's happening in the 6RRS, that's happening in the Airport Squadron, that's well beyond something that we can write a contract for, right? That's the ship that I think that General Brown's really talking about, right? We will find the right widgets in order to do whatever we're going to go do. The mind shift change that the youngest airman in the room can look at the oldest airman in the room and say that I have a better way, and let's actually do it. That's the mind shift that has to change, right? The mind shift of the tech sergeant looking at the young airman saying, you need to suck shit because I suck shit, right? That's got to go, right? Our young airmen think differently than we do. They're incredibly bright. They know how to get things fast. We kind of got to turn them loose and see what happens. Now, you say all that. Good order and discipline matters, right? And so you can very quickly get off the rails with good ideas and all this other stuff and still maintain the fact that we are in the business of killing people, right? That's what we do, right? Of raining havoc on our enemies, right? And so there's a balance there, right? And I don't believe that General Brown wants that balance to go away, right? I think he wants to unleash what's already there, right? And make it cool to have a new idea, right? Celebrate the ordinary, right? Like, how do you get the airman who saved another airman 3 hours and celebrate that, right? It's not with just some widget, right? It's usually I hate the word process. I can't stand that word because process means you do it the same way every time, and we don't do shit the same way every time, right? It's not how we operate, you know. But being able to do that, it's intimidating. Here, I thought we were really, really good at innovation things, right? I mean, we took pilot training and turned it upside down, and we could have a full-on conversation whether or not it's a good idea or not, right? But it fundamentally changed in the 2 years I was there. And none of that was my idea. Not any of it. It was all from young IPs, looking at the way people learn, bringing in educational experts, looking at, hey, can we do this differently? And we just said yes, right? And you got to see a different product. Right? And now the argument is it better or worse, about the same amount of time, right? That argument still has to happen. But I thought we were really good at it. But it was so isolated to just the flyers. I never paid attention to the support folks, to the medics. I didn't know to do it, right? It's the first time I was wing commander. Weird, right? Didn't know, right? So here, I'm not disinterested in what OG's doing, but I'm really interested in what you're doing. Right, and I'm really interested in what medics are doing, and I'm really interested in what those other folks are doing because I've seen what the flyers can do. Right, I got a baseline of what that kind of looks like. And so, the only thing that we talk about innovation at Travis is what the OG's doing. We've lost the battle. We've lost, but that is not what the boss is talking about. How I do.
Perfect. Okay, sir.
ma'am.
Yes, sir. Kevin Denning, Assistant Flight Commander of Transition. In our flight, we have the majority of all the brand new airmen in the squadron, a lot of young folks who are brand new to the Air Force. So based on what you just said, so innovation, we can definitely, work on developing that, encouraging that in our flight. Are there any other traits that you would like to see in our young airmen being developed and being focused on?
So I'm gonna talk out of both sides of my mouth, okay? Watch this. So I'm from the country, I like to speak in analogies, right? And so, when I am looking at a lieutenant for the very first time, I give them 3 things, right? I tell them, nobody knows your job better than you, you better act like it, right? And so if you're a new lieutenant or a new airman in a squadron, until you know what you're doing, it really doesn't matter, right? And I'll get to why that is in a second. I need you to own being a co-pilot. You are not going to be the chief of staff of the Air Force tomorrow. You're not. But you probably got a good idea that will do something, right? And so I want them to cage their energy into the things that they can control, right? I can't control how many days of leave that you get, right? I'd love to, but I don't. So bitching and complaining that I don't have enough leave really doesn't move the needle, right? So I want them to, this is my job jar for the next year, 18 months. I want, when they say my name, that they never have to question whether or not I know that or not, right? And so that leads to what I call, you have to be credible, right? And in a flying squadron, credibility happens at your scheduling desk, right? And it goes like this. Hey, who wants to fly with Fernandez? And if 7 or 8, 10 people all raise their hands, that's called credibility, right? If they, to be mean here, they say COTS, and everybody in the room goes, only with an IP, you see what that means, right? And you earn that credibility as a young person by doing the blocking and tackling of just knowing your job, right? It has to be to the point when they say your name, they say, let's go, because they know exactly what they're going to get, right? And the bad part, specifically in our community, is that you earn that credibility one mission at a time, one day on the trip at a time, and you lose it in one shitty decision, right? Earn it in nickels and pennies, spend it in $100 bills, right? The funny part is that the younger the airmen, I generally see that they don't understand that when they make a mistake that their credibility is diminished. Most of them want instant forgiveness and move on, right? That's not life. That's not realistic, right? And so it leads to my third point, which is being accountable, right? And so when we make a mistake, how are you going to own it, right? Are you going to go to your flight commander and be like, that was me. What shit do I have to shovel for the next 3 months to get me back into good graces, right? As opposed to whining and complaining that nobody loves me anymore, right? I want to see the kid that's going to take their mistake, own it, move out, or better yet, find that supervisor who goes to the other supervisor and says, no, you don't have to deal with that person, that's mine. I got it. And we're going to get him back rehabilitated, and in 2 months, you're not going to know him better. I got it, I own it. Right? And that's the difference with crimes and mistakes and all those other things, man. We generally know the difference of what those are, but that's really what I want them to do, right? Is to know their job, get really good at it, and when they make a mistake, own it, right? Because that when you own it, your credibility increases, which means you'll get more opportunities to be able to learn the thing at the beginning. How to do? Okay. Who else? Yeah.
Yes, I do, sir. Just piggybacking off of what the last 2 questions were. I know you received the comm squadron, the mission defense team briefings. What challenges do you see us facing as we're transitioning from a support function over into an operational?
I'm not worried about you, I'm worried about me. To be fair. So if they're not tracking, so comm, in the Air Force has been what I call blocking and tackling customer service comm. Like, does my internet work? Does my email work? You know, the stuff to be able to do our jobs, that has been 80% of their job jar for forever, right? And the funding lines associated with it show that. We spend about $60 billion over about $12 billion a year on all things comm. Do the math. 80% on blocking and tackling, 20% on going after the bad guys. Okay? We have made a specific shift to take that like this. And now it's 80% go get the bad guys and 20% blocking and tackling, and give the rest of that blocking and tackling to some third party, AT&T, whatever service to be able to do that. We are going to bitch like you read about, right? Because by definition, the level of service that we're used to will degrade until that can bring itself back to a normalized area. I argue that it's worth the risk because I've seen what the bad guys are doing, and we're not doing enough to combat it. That's at the end of the day, right? And so I'm worried that we're going to lose our patience, right? If you guys what I'm worried about, I'm worried that we'll lose our patience. And we being all of us, not Travis or whoever, that we've been accustomed to a certain level of service, and then it will change, and we can't see the enemy that you're fighting, right? We don't know enough about it. Most of it's classified, and we can't appreciate it because it's behind the light switch, right? So that's what I'm nervous about, is can we stay patient enough while that actually becomes a reality? Okay. What are we doing time? Anybody else got anything good? I got a couple of closing comments on the meeting. So.
We're good, sir. We got like 20 minutes, we got time, but I know you're just getting
Let
tight.
me just make sure that this is not like the chief of staff of the airport. This is a telemarketer. That was my wife. I probably should have answered that. Okay. So I just wrote a few notes down. One of the questions that was asked is what books do I read, right? My two favorite books are Start With Why, Simon Sinek. If you haven't read that book, if you watch me at all over the next 2 years, that's kind of my bread and butter, right? Is if I can't get you to buy into what we're selling, none of this matters, right? One that you're not tracking, that unless you've done PME 37,000 times like I have, very short read called Lincoln on Leadership. It's a series of very short anecdotes of Lincoln with his generals, and Lincoln with his Secretary of State and a few others, how to deal with jerks, how to deal with folks who have perceived power. And it's written, remember, it's from the 1860s. It was written in 1940 or so. It's a cheap book. It's probably free on Amazon but yeah, you can read it literally in an evening. My sense is that if you read it, you'll have highlighted passages that you'll come back to, right? It's one that I really enjoy. As far as people that I like to listen to, if you've never watched former Chief of Staff General Welsh give a speech, you should Google him. General Welsh, as both the chief, his first speech that kind of set him afire from the public speaking was when he was the commandant of the cadets at the academy. If you ever really just want to feel inspired about what servant leadership can be in our Air Force, I think he is one of the best examples of that. I use his 5 things that he really cared about. I don't use these in a public setting per se, as far as I don't want to steal his thunder. But if you've been around me, you'll hear these words sometime. Make common sense the #1 rule in your life. If it's stupid, please stop doing it, right? If it doesn't make sense and there's no value added, what are you doing it for, right? And the litmus test of this is generally, if you have a report that's due, tell your boss that you're not going to do it, and see, one, if they care. Wait a week. If nobody else cares, never do it again. It's about right? We'll find out who actually needs it, right? That's one. 2 is if you're leading an organization, whether it be a squadron, wing, whatever, all the way down to your flights, like you're as a flight commander for student transitions, you got to be stable, right? And here's what that means. Your airmen can't guess how you're going to react when they come to you with stuff. If you're going to flip your shit every single time they come to you with something, they're going to stop coming, right? If you are going to say yes to every single thing that they're going to ask, well, then again, they're not going to come to you, right? And so you got to be able to be predictable and approachable, right? And so what I try to do with the squadron commanders is I try to put us in settings that are very much less formal than sitting in my conference room where I'm sitting at the head of the table and they're not, because I want them to be able to literally just text and say, boss, I got one and I'm not sure, right? That's really what you're looking for, right? And then work it out from there. I've got to have a couple of those with Brian already. I didn't make his decision for him. I just usually the words start with, have you considered, right? And we kind of go from there, right? So create stability. 2 is believe in your dudes and your gals. Believe in them, right? They have been trained by the best people in the world, right? We have the best Air Force in the world. Chances are they were trained by the best. You have to believe that they're going to do the right thing and execute to the best of their ability. When they don't, we will deal with that, right? But the starting point has to be that you believe in them. And when you give them something difficult, they'll crush it, okay? 4th, my favorite one is that pride matters. Pride in yourself, in your unit, in your wing, in your flight, whatever it is you're doing. If you're not like doing this with the freaking chest out, then what are you doing it for? Like, it's like, who has siblings, right? Who can pick on their siblings? You can. Can somebody else come in and pick on your sister? No, same thing, right? Like, I love the squadrons have robberies. I love it. I would have it no other way. Now, when you guys start stealing shit from each other, now that's a whole other thing. But I want it to where the double deuce thinks that they're the Caspian. I want it to where the 6th thinks the 9th is inferior. Like, I want that. I want the comm guys to hate everybody, right? You know, because yeah, that identity matters. It does. Like, some point, someone did ask a question about trust Travis. We can ask you, where that come from? I can tell you that. You have to have something to rally around, right? What are you going to rally around? And in the Air Force, it's identify and move by the squadron, right? The wings, that's not what they're for. Your identity is your squadron, right? And so if you're lucky, when you leave this Air Force, you have 3 or 4. You have 3 or 4 identities that when you hear those numbers, you perk up just a little bit, right? For me, it's the 10th. I was a plank owner in the 10th of the C-17s. I was traded to the 4th because of PNAF. And I was a horseman of the OSS. Those are my three squadrons. They have, in this case, happen to all 3 be on the same base because I spent 8 years there, right? So what are you going to identify with? Because that pride matters. And then last is just care so much that it hurts. Okay. Last one, and then if you want to know about trust Travis, I'll tell you. I'm going to ask you to read this, right? Because every time I try to read it, I don't really make it through it, to be fair. Right, so I had an airman, and I'll say her name. I got to work with General Welsh when he was the chief. I was the Undersecretary of the Air Force's MA, and so I got to see General Welsh do his thing. And he had an airman that worked for him when he was a colonel that worked for him 3 times after that, right? And she started as a 2-striper, made below zone, ended up making staff, tech, and when by the time that he's the chief of staff of the Air Force, she's the chief, right? And they kept interacting. And he said the best advice he ever got as a leader was from her, right? So I don't know if you can read my handwriting, but it was 7 things. So if you can imagine your truth asking you to be able to do this, That's what leadership is.
Care so much. Number one, where are we going? Number two, push me when slow.
When I'm slow.
Push me when I'm slow. Number three, call me when I'm fast. Number four, reassure me when I lose faith. Number five, inspire me when I lose enthusiasm. Number six, when I was successful, get behind me. And number seven, when I struggle or get scared, walk in front so I can follow you.
That was a two-striker. Once you wrote that, that was a two-striker. This is pretty cool. You want to take a shot of that? Yeah. Oh, that's, you're asking what I want traits of the leader. That's it. Right? You can do something that even resembles that. Right? Then it gets pretty cool. Okay. You want to hear the Trust Travis story? All right. So, I trust Travis because I'm an idiot. Right? And I mean that as, when you're the senior leader of an organization, you have to have something that your message, from a leadership standpoint, can always come back to. Right? And you try to do it in whatever what you believe when you take over an organization, what it needs. Okay? When I was a squadron commander, I was an OSS squadron commander, and if you've been in an OSS before, they are believed to be the cast clowns, right? Now they're not, because if they don't show up for work, none of you people fly airplanes ever, right? But there's a feeling that they don't get the love that they need, right? And so for me, it was, you may think that being a gregarious cheerleader is what I do on a Tuesday. It's actually not what I generally like doing, but I'm decent at it, right? And so I made it my point to ensure that every single person in my organization knew why they mattered and that they were part of an incredible team. And so We Are Marshall, you ever see the movie? Right, I stole that, and it became We Are Horsemen, right? And when you have an organization that has 80% between the ages of 18 and 24, you can football coach the hell out of that, right? And so that's where we went, and we went from being the squadron that was never showing up to the squadron that showed up to everything, and we're the loudest people in the room. And we went from being not known to noticed and winning every award. Right? It really wasn't that hard. I got to Vance, and everything at Vance was actually just fine. There wasn't anything wrong at Vance. But it felt like every day was making donuts. Go fun. The energy was zero. Like, it just didn't exist. And for flyers, they flew 225 sorties a day, 1,000 takeoffs and landings. Every Tuesday, right? With people who are trying to kill them in the airplane, right? Every single day, right? We were by far the most desirable UPT location because of Laughlin and Columbus, right? So generally, the folks that were there were pretty good and happy-ish to be at Vance. But it was just kind of meh. And so I came up with something called Vance Proud. And the spoon off of that is that if you're not proud of what you're doing, what the hell are you doing it for? And so if you're not proud of it, get out of my organization. And then I kind of stirred the pots up with the flying squadrons and got them competing against each other. And next thing you know, I have Airman Jones from the command post signing their emails, Vance Proud Airman Jones. And then that became something else and something else and something else until finally you were actually chastised for not signing your emails, Vance Proud. Right? Now, in a perfect world, that's happening at the squadron level. Right? That's where you want that energy to be. Okay? Vance is so small that I had the luxury of doing it there. Now, I come to the behemoth, right? And speaking of a place that doesn't have a lot of bad stuff going on, place has kind of got it going on. The last wing commander's a pretty good guy. Command chief, pretty good guy. What am I going to bring to this fight that is different than Jeff. Well, if Jeff's the smartest person I know, I'm the loudest person I know, right? And so I went with my strength and said, what do we need right now? Well, what are we dealing with right now? Civil unrest, diversity, all of these things, right? All of these words and programs and all this stuff that we could have an argument on whether they work or not. But to me, at the end of the day, it came down to we don't trust each other, none of this matters. And Travis happens to start with a T. It wasn't rocket science. Yeah, the us part in the middle was, I was told 17 times that Travis was the bully, and I better get this right because everybody looks to us to win. Right, well, that's called external trust, right? But I believe that none of that mattered unless we had it internally. And so it's really about us. If we don't get the us right, none of that other stuff matters, right? So I really only have to know 2 words to be the thinking maker. Travis. Trust Travis. And then I'll let the other organizations develop their spin off of that in order to create the culture that they need in their unit. Okay? I'm not mandating that everybody puts Trust Travis in their emails, right? But it'd be really cool if somebody did. You know why? Because it means they bought in. That's the only reason it matters, is because somebody bought in, right? And it is what it is. Okay. We'll give him time to be able to do his thing.
Absolutely. Just a couple thoughts real quick, so I'll take 2.2 minutes. So first, that was very inspiring and also enlightening. When you gave us your thought process and that dynamic environment with the fires, a lot of us, I think, were surprised. I know I was, sort of a lot of squadron commanders were when you walked us through that, because we had this perception that, a senior leader at the crown jewel of AMC is going to have every piece of key information that he needs at his fingertips, right? And it's going to be real time. But the reality of it is, much like the fog and friction of war, that it's not there. And it comes down to the trust in that team, right? The belief piece that our commander just said, that really comes down to looking each and every one in the eyes, and knowing that the leaders above you, supervisors above you, and those you lead below you are on one sheet of music, right? And that trust in that team dynamic is there, established, and that's going to get us across the finish line. That day, launching all those jets and giving our teams, our families, a safe space that we can come back to a base that's ready to rock and roll, and what we're doing right now. Sir, thanks for sharing your time with us, being vulnerable with us. This PD piece is also, it's refreshing because you hear see certain words, these certain phrases about trusting your team, relationships matter, discussions matter, the trust, the ownership, the accountability, being credible in your craft, common sense, right? It's not rocket science, a lot of what we do. Yeah, flying the C5, flying the KC-10, managing the comm structure, right, in this beast of an organization. It's not easy. That takes a lot of training, right? But at the end of the day, if what we do day in and day out, that blocking, tackling doesn't support our primary mission, then let's get rid of it. And let's boil it down to what really matters. So, sir, thanks for being here. We had a couple minutes to pitch how we're branching out our PD program across the base to the 6th Comm Squadron here with Lieutenant Colonel Kuhn. That's going to talk about what we're going to execute on the 15th of October. So mark your calendars, smash that subscribe button, that like, and over to you.
Thanks, Brian, for introducing me and bringing us along. First of all, let me introduce Oz, my deputy, and also Master Sergeant Harris. He's the super NCO that runs the shop that takes care of all the end user equipment. And without him, well, most of our computers won't really work. So thanks for Sergeant Harris for that. Who am I? Well, I am the son of someone that was declared as a class enemy by the Communist Chinese Party in the 50s. My father left and escaped Communist China in the 50s. That's who I am. He left to Hong Kong. I was born in Hong Kong. I became a US citizen when I was 16. Joined the US military. Originally not because of my ties to my past, but it's become that way, right? So General Brown talked about in Accelerate Change or Die, that we need a better understanding of Communist China. Yesterday, the House Intel Committee released a report that says that the US government, the national security apparatus, the military, is not ready to face the threat because we don't understand the nature of the threat from Communist China. I have a little expertise in that. as Brian may have mentioned, that I taught stuff about Communist China at SDE, at the Eisenhower School. And then somehow I became a commander afterwards. But that's what we're going to talk about. I look forward to a discussion on the 15th on Communist China, what their motivations are, where that comes from, historical perspectives, how they think, how they see the world, and why they see it that way. It's not going to be a force on force discussion, who will win if we fight tomorrow, but it's about motivation and drive. So I look forward to seeing all of you. And before I forget, my officers and senior NCOs are also on the Zoom call right
Cool,
now.
awesome.
So that's how we also integrate.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thanks, Martin. Well, so that concludes our PD series for today. Tune in next week. We're going to have another joint PD series. And then again, on the 15th of October, we're going to have our guest, Lieutenant Colonel Martin Poon, Comm Squadron Commander at the 60th year, to come and give us his subject matter expertise and his background. So again, subscribe, smash that like button, all right? And we'll see you next week, everyone. Carry on and have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, everybody. Don't care.